Excellency Ambassador, first of all, allow me on behalf of the President of the University to express our deep thanks for your contribution to the education field, especially to our school today, and also to the highlighting on the India room downstairs that with your contribution it reflected the rich culture of India in the room that we decorated. Ladies and gentlemen, today I have the honor to introduce to you the Excellency Ambassador of India, Excellency Naveen Srivastava. He is an experienced diplomat serving India since early 90s, and he has been serving his countries in Hong Kong, in Beijing, in Shanghai, and in Washington. So he has specialized himself in both bilateral and multilateral, especially in the field of disarmament and non-proliferation. Today he has kind enough to give a consent to give us a talk on the India Act East policies. Let me inform you a little bit that in the early 80s and 60s, 70s, Indian focused its markets to the West, but from the 90s on, with the success story of ASEAN and the global, neo-global change, India has changed its focus to the East. But in the late 90s and early 20s, the previous government has introduced the Look East policy, but the current government of Prime Minister Modi has changed it from Look East to Act East. We will hear what is the content and the substance that India has focused on their business, investments, and culture and other fields to the east. Without further detail on the program, on behalf of the President of the University, would like to invite Your Excellency Srivastava to proceed with the talks. The floor is yours, sir.
Dear friends, students, thank you for giving me this opportunity this afternoon to come and talk to you about India's Act East policy. First of all, I would like to thank Excellency Dr. Gautam Mohan, the President of the University of Cambodia, Excellency Srivastava, for taking the initiative of not just arranging this lecture, but also having an India room, which I'm told all the ASEAN dialogue partners you will have. We are very grateful and appreciative of this opportunity, which will not only help, I think, let the students of University of Cambodia know more about India, but also help in engendering greater contacts between students and India. So, as Excellency Dr. Gautam said, it will help in people-to-people contact. So, first of all, let me convey our deep gratitude from myself and from the embassy on that gesture. Excellency, you mentioned about the Act East policy. This is also a particularly good time to talk about Act East policy. because this year is a very special one. It's a year where we will be marking 25th anniversary of dialogue partnership between India and ASEAN. So again, you have given me a very appropriate opportunity to talk about India's policies towards ASEAN and Southeast Asia in general. I'll broadly divide my talk into three parts. One, I'll talk generally about India's foreign policy very briefly and how ASEAN fits into it, and then I'll spend some time on India-Cambodia relations in that context. So on the screen, if you would see, this one. On the screen, as you would see, I put a map of South and Southeast Asia. Basically, it's India is in the middle of the South Asia, the big purple country which you see as a quadrilateral. And Southeast Asia is, you know, most of the countries of the Southeast Asia. The idea of putting this map is when we talk about in foreign policy terms in India, we have generally tended to organize our foreign policy in terms of concentric circles. You start your circle from your neighborhood. So our immediate neighborhood is South Asia, which is Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, Afghanistan. And we have an organization called South Asian Association of Regional Cooperation, or SARC. And we are all members of that. But as we expand that circle a little bit more, we just touch the Southeast Asia. So if you look, the northeast part of India, the purple part, is actually shares a long boundary with Myanmar. And we normally call it beautifully that where India's northeast ends, Southeast Asia begins. And therefore, it's a natural corollary that India and Southeast Asia should be partners and neighbors. And we regard Southeast Asia as a part of our neighborhood in Asia. That's in the north. But if you look in south also, there are a range of islands on the Indian Ocean. Now those islands are called Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Those islands are actually much closer to Indonesia and Thailand than they are to mainland India. So again, that geographically reflects how close we are to Southeast Asia. There are other aspects of our closeness, including culture and language and food habits, which makes us very natural partners. Therefore, this is the fundamental driving or motivation why India adopted an Look East policy in the early 90s. As a background, in 1991, our then Prime Minister, P.V. Narasimha Rao, he enunciated a policy called Look East policy. As Excellency Kyotia said, before that we were focusing on West mostly. And West, again, there were certain reasons. We need oil. Like Cambodia, for example, you import all your oil from outside Cambodia. You don't have any oil resources out there. India also imports 80% of its oil and energy resources from outside. We don't have anything, and most of it used to come from Gulf. So therefore, it was natural we focus more on Middle East and Gulf countries. But from 90s, we started changing our policies and looking towards East. So in 1991, we started Look East policy, and we established our dialogue partnership with ASEAN in 1992. That partnership progressed well, and in 2002, in Phnom Penh actually, we elevated our dialogue partnership to a summit level partnership, which means Prime Minister of India would have dialogue with Prime Ministers and Presidents of the ASEAN member states. And in 2012, as a natural progression, we made it into a strategic partnership, so that our relations are not just economic or political, they are strategic in nature. We look at each other in terms of our long-term interests. Sorry, I'm not very familiar with this. touch the button which has caused the whole thing. Yeah, that's true. Okay.
Next one. Làm nhiều chọc gì đó không? Chọc. Next chọc. Long thở bắt bỏ mọi cái chia không thở. Chia không thở. Mình ngồi ba không thở.
So, sorry for that little technical break, but as I was saying, we established dialogue partnerships in 1992, summit level interaction in 2002 in Phnom Penh, and strategic partnership in 2012 when we were celebrating 20 years of our dialogue partnership. This year is a special one because yeah, that's it. This year, 2017, therefore marks the 25th anniversary of our dialogue partnership with ASEAN, 15th anniversary of our summit level partnership, and 5th anniversary of our strategic relationship. As Excellency Kyotia mentioned, when Prime Minister Modi came to power, Prime Minister Modi, our current Prime Minister, came to power in 2014 in May, in an election which he won with majority. When he was attending the India-ASEAN Summit at Naypyidaw in Myanmar in 2014, he said, and I quote, that India's look east policy has become act east policy. He further added, a rapidly developing India and a rapidly developing ASEAN can be great partners for each other. We are both keen to enhance our cooperation in advancing balance, peace and stability in the region. So that's when from look east we became an act east policy. Now it's not just a change of words from one verb to another verb, look or act, but it also meant that we started taking measures and steps to ensure that our partnership actually becomes very practically oriented, and there are several new initiatives which have been announced over the last 2 years. At the center of our Act East policies is our relationship with ASEAN. Because we believe unless both India and ASEAN develop, we cannot have an Asian century. A lot of leaders talk about an Asian century. A lot of people today talk about Asia's resurgence in the global economic and political order. Now that will not happen if India and ASEAN both don't develop and both don't cooperate together. Because if you look, India has a population of about 1.2 billion people. ASEAN has more than 600 million people. If you put two and two together, we are close to 2 billion people, which is roughly about 1/3 or slightly less than 1/3 of the global population. Now, you can't have global prosperity if 1/3 of the population is not doing well. So it is essential that both India and ASEAN cooperate, both India and ASEAN develop, and that makes a very fundamental basis for us to pursue our cooperation. How do we go about doing the adopted an ASEAN-India Plan of Action in from 2016 to 2020, which means it started last year. It was adopted in 2015. It identified specific areas of cooperation and initiatives. Now, these are broadly divided into three pillars. One is political and security-related aspects. Other is economic, and finally the third is called socio-cultural. In each of these three pillars, there are several initiatives which have been taken up, and I'll talk briefly about them. We've also opened and started our mission to ASEAN in Jakarta. So we have a special diplomatic mission to ASEAN in Jakarta, which was established in 2014. Again, a symbol of our importance that we attach to our relations with ASEAN, and also a symbol of Act East policy. Now, as a part of 25th anniversary this year, we have planned a series of events, and the theme that we have chosen with ASEAN is Shared Values, Common Destiny. Again, the word shared values is very symbolic because culturally India and ASEAN are very close to each other. You look at in Cambodia, our cultures merge and influence each other, whether you look at temples at Angkor Wat or you look at Buddhism. Common destiny, again, as I mentioned, we totally constitute about 2 billion people, and therefore it is our common destiny that we need to progress and do socially well and economically well. Now, over the next year, starting from earlier this year, we have been taking up a series of activities. These included exchange of congratulatory messages between Prime Minister and President Duterte, who was then the chair of ASEAN at this moment. We have recently had a senior officials meeting in India with ASEAN. We will have 30 dialogue mechanisms between India and ASEAN dealing with different aspects of cooperation. Some of the main items that we have actually taken forward are we've created an ASEAN-India Cooperation Fund, which gets administered through ASEAN Secretariat to take developmental activities in various ASEAN countries. There is also an ASEAN-India Science and Technology Fund, because science and technology, we believe, can be a great enabler for promoting economic and social development in each of our countries. And finally, because climate change is something that we all face together, we have created an ASEAN-India Green Fund to help promote renewable and green technologies for a sustainable future. Under all these funds, several projects are being implemented. These include setting up a space station in Vietnam, which will receive data from Indian satellites, and that will be shared with all the countries. The data will be used for resource mapping or land use, better land use. How do you ensure better land use or better use of water resources or other natural resources? We are also collaborating in fighting malaria with several countries, including with Cambodia. And my colleague today, earlier this morning, had a joint function with the Center for Combating Malaria in Cambodia, because we are doing jointly a project under ASEAN partnership with them. Similarly, we are trying to promote agricultural research, because again, food habits in India and food habits in ASEAN are very similar. Our crops are very similar. So we're working on various agricultural technologies to improve productivity, to make our crops more resistant to disease. Besides these practical cooperation, there are also dialogues which help encourage people-to-people contact between think tanks, between businessmen, between academics and diplomats. So overall, we are looking at three-pronged approach: commerce, culture and connectivity, to help promote our relationship. Culture, I mentioned about the India room. I am not sure how many of you have gone and seen the India room, but I would encourage you to go and see. You will see in that room we have photographs of some historic monuments of India, some of places, other places of India. And once you see those historic monuments, you would relate it to the monuments that you have in Cambodia. We have, for example, photographs of Bodh Gaya, where Lord Buddha attained Nirvana, which is again a very close connection between India and Cambodia. Similarly, your temples at Angkor Wat or Borobudur in Indonesia reflect our ancient linkages formed out of Hindus' cultures spread in Southeast Asia. To make it into more modern context, we are right now working not just in Cambodia but in Myanmar as well as in Vietnam and in Indonesia to restore some of these old temples and conserve these old temples. We're also trying to re-establish old linkages. In India there used to be a famous university called Nalanda University in 6th and 7th century BC, which was then the largest university in the world. We re-established a Nalanda University a couple of years back. It is an international board and it has started offering courses in various humanities areas. And specifically for Cambodia as well as Laos, Myanmar and Vietnam, we offer scholarships for people to go and pursue studies at the Nalanda University. In order to promote more people-to-people contact and cultural contacts, India has also liberalized its visa regime for people from ASEAN. So right now, for example, if you want to go to India, you can apply for an electronic visa authorization. You don't need to come to the embassy, you can go online, apply for a visa, you get a receipt, you can land in India, and with that receipt, you will get visa stamped when you enter the country. And this has been done specifically to promote two-way tourism between India and ASEAN. Finally, as I said, we also offer scholarships to students, not just from Cambodia, but from all across ASEAN to come and study in India. Let me talk about the commerce aspect. Commerce, India and ASEAN our trade is about $75 billion or $77 billion. This was in 2015. And it is growing at a rate of 12%, so it is growing very fast. We have signed an ASEAN-India free trade agreement. We've also signed an ASEAN-India services agreement, which is yet to come into force. But when it does, we hope our trade and investment flows will grow much more rapidly. In terms of investment, there are a large number of Indian companies which are invested in various ASEAN countries. And similarly, ASEAN companies are now investing in India. India today is the world's fastest growing large economy. So if you look at largest economies of the world, India at present is number one in that. With Cambodia also, as a part of our general rise of trade with ASEAN, there has been an upward trend in the trade, but our trade is very, very less compared to other countries of the ASEAN. And therefore, there is a lot of potential to increase that trade. India, as I mentioned today, is growing very fast. And the new government under Prime Minister Modi has launched several initiatives to make our growth rate much faster. These are programs to create smart cities. They are programs to create more manufacturing facilities in India. And also programs to increase skill development in India. Something which is common, I find, with Cambodia. India's population is, at this present, more than 50% of our population is young, less than 25 years of age, something very common in Cambodia. All these people are looking for employment opportunities and a better future for themselves. Some of them are going to the universities and are able to get higher education, but some are not. So we have launched a new initiative about 2 years back called Skill India. The whole aim of the Skill India program is to provide vocational training skills to a large number of people so that they are employment ready and they can pick up employment either in companies or they can form their own small companies and generate employment. And that's something which I find very common with Cambodia. Finally, as a part of commerce and commerce, we also have Science, Technology and Innovation Fund, which I mentioned earlier. We have increased the quantum of this fund to $5 million. It's a $5 million fund which is used to fund various scientific activities all across the ASEAN. The third leg, as I mentioned, was connectivity. I've shown you the map of India and ASEAN. Now, although our land borders are very close, but these are some of very difficult geographical terrains. There are the roads and the shipping networks are very less developed at this point. And therefore, we are both trying to increase our connectivity between roads so that, for example, a person traveling by road from India can easily come to Cambodia or Myanmar or Vietnam. We have, as a part of this, started work on India, Myanmar, Thailand trilateral highway, which hopefully will be finished by 2019. And that will allow people from India's northeast to use that road and come up to Bangkok. We are now in discussion with Cambodia, Laos and Vietnam to see how this could be extended to all the three countries. And therefore, it would be possible for people to just use road to travel across from India to Cambodia, for instance. There is already a road network existing. It's not very fully developed for commercial traffic, but if you are individually, I think, excited about traveling, you can do so. Just for example, last year we had 5 Indian women motorcycle riders who came from India all the way to Vietnam, Cambodia, and then they went back to Bangkok and back to India. And they traveled all the way across from road. So that's this connectivity. And connectivity, apart from road, we are looking at air connectivity. Right now, India has air connectivity with almost all ASEAN countries, either direct flights or through indirect flights. Some countries we do not have direct flight as air, for example, Laos, Vietnam, or Cambodia. But we are working to create conditions for private airline companies to start looking at this possibility. Further, in order to boost our connectivity, our Prime Minister announced a line of credit of $1 billion to support physical connectivity projects, which is connectivity on roads, shipping lanes, etc., as well as digital connectivity. Because this is the day and age of using e-commerce or digital platform. Most of you will be on Facebook. Digital connectivity between India and ASEAN countries. And we have offered several projects to the Cambodian government as a part of this. We are hoping that we will make progress. So that's broadly where India and ASEAN relationship stands now, and what we are trying to achieve in terms of Act East. Basically, we are trying to bring India and ASEAN much more closer integrated together, so that we can both work and contribute to each other's prosperity in terms of economic growth and social development. In this overall context, let me just briefly mention about India-Cambodia relationship. With Cambodia, we've had centuries-old relationship. As I mentioned, temples at Angkor Wat or different parts of Cambodia reflect that. But in modern times, after 1953, when you got your independence, we were one of the first countries to establish diplomatic relations with Cambodia. And King Father visited India several times during the 1950s and early 60s. There was a break in our diplomatic relations during the Khmer Rouge era, but once that era got over, in 1981, India was one of the first countries, or in fact, the only country from the non-Soviet bloc at that particular point to recognize officially Cambodia and have our diplomatic presence here in 1981, when most of the Western world and other allies of the Western countries were not willing to recognize Cambodia as a government, and there was civil war going on. And that political basis of our relationship has actually now developed into several areas of cooperation. Today, we are, as I mentioned, cooperating in different aspects, from cultural conservation. If you've gone to Angkor Wat, I am sure you might have visited the Tapom Temple. Tapom Temple has been restored and conserved by Indian Aid, and this is continuing. We've been doing so since 2004. We've spent about $10 million, and we'll be spending another $5 million over the next couple of years to restore that temple to its glory. We are also involved in the reconstruction and restoration of temple at Here, which is on the Cambodia-Thailand border, and we will be working to restore that temple also. In terms of economic development, we just launched a project last week to provide rural water supply to Cambodia. This is a $12 million project to provide hand pumps in rural Cambodia to provide drinking water. Simultaneously, we are building a small dam in South province. We are working also on electric transmission to provide better and more electricity to Phnom Penh coming from dams in the north. Since, as I mentioned, India is a very youthful country just like Cambodia, we also know about and we also appreciate the need to provide skills and training to the youth. And India has established an IT training center here in Cambodia, which has been working very well. But now we are scaling it up. And this work is being done in collaboration with NITTCT, or the National Institute of Telecommunications Training. Its headquarters at National Highway 6. And by the end of this year, this new center will be operational, which will be able to train a large number of Cambodian youths in IT training and help you get more employable skills. Other aspects of training is we provide every year about 150 training opportunities to Cambodian officials and people working in different areas to go to India and do short-term and long-term courses. And so far in the last 10 years, we've had more than 1,400 people from Cambodia who have availed of this training. As a part of this, I mentioned about scholarships. Every year, India offers 27 scholarships to Cambodian students to pursue either bachelor's, master's, or their doctoral degree in India. These scholarships cover the full tuition and different subjects that you may want to study. This year, for example, for 27 slots, we have 56 applicants. And we've shortlisted and we've sent and we are just awaiting the results. So the next year, I hope more students from University of Cambodia will apply for further studies to India. And India offers much more advantage compared to going to Australia or the US. In terms of it is one, cheaper, second, it is closer to home, and third, the culture is very similar to Cambodia. So you will feel at home if you study in India. I mentioned about trade and economic cooperation. Trade at present is very low, but it's increasing. At the same time, Indian companies are now starting to invest in Cambodia. And there are several companies which are having plans to increase their investment in Cambodia. I'm not sure how many of you have seen, you've seen the tuk-tuks around in Phnom Penh. They're a very common sight. But there is also an Indian tuk-tuk here, which is different from your tuk-tuk, which is basically a motorcycle. Indian tuk-tuk has 3 wheels and it's a yellow color taximeter which you will see. That's an Indian company. And it's an Indian company called Bajaj, which is the largest manufacturer of motorcycles in the world. So they have set up investments here in the last 2-3 years, and they are doing very well, and that's an encouraging sign. The Government of India has recently also created a special fund of $100 million, which will basically be used to encourage investments in Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam, these 4 countries. Right now, we are examining possibilities of investing in different sectors, especially where India's strengths are there. This could be education, medical or healthcare sector, and tourism. So these are the areas we're looking, and hopefully over the next 1 or 2 years, we will see more investments coming from India. So finally, I think all this talk probably should give you a fair idea how India is focusing on ASEAN and how ASEAN itself, various member states of ASEAN, as well as ASEAN as a collective body, is reciprocating those initiatives with India, and we are together trying to build up a partnership which is mutually beneficial, which helps people in each of our countries to develop their full potential, both in terms of social and economic development. India and our Prime Minister Modi has repeatedly said that we will work with our ASEAN partners in meeting and realizing this dream that we have of an Asian century. With those words, I'll end and be open for any questions that you have. Before I end, I would also like to say, Embassy of India, if you want to know more about India, our education programs, what are we doing there, we are on Facebook, India and Cambodia, please follow us. And we are on Twitter. I'm aware Twitter is not very popular or as popular as Facebook in Cambodia, but we also give out the news or happenings of embassy at the Twitter. And finally, we have our embassy website. So all these three are ways of connecting with us. And Facebook is certainly the most easiest and quickest way of connecting with us. Should you have any questions, queries, want more information, please do get in touch with us. Thank you again for your
Thank you, Excellency, for your talks on the India Act East policy. We can see that India is a long-term friend of Cambodia. India is the first country to recognize Cambodia after we got independent from France in 1953. And again, after the fall of the Khmer Rouge, India did not support the Khmer Rouge. Unlike the other Western world that support the Khmer Rouge, India did not support. They broke the relation with the Khmer Rouge. And they re-established diplomatic relation in 1981 with Cambodia again after the fall of the Khmer Rouge. And India is the one free world that provides scholarship to Cambodian students at that time. And as an evidence, I am the first batch of the Cambodian students studying in India. And we happen to be, our institute and our university and his institute happen to be neighbor and next to each other at that time in 1981. India has also focused their Act East policy, especially in the field of connectivity. They have focused on opening up the East-West corridor through the highway from India through Thailand, Myanmar, and intending to connect through Cambodia, Vietnam, and Laos. So these are so the physical connectivity apart from the software. We are also looking at the soft skills such as the e-doctor and also e-medicines. And we also looking, India also as a partner of ASEAN also joining in the field of political security. They joined in East Asia Summit, the EAS, including the defense mechanism as well. So you read the newspaper, sometimes you will see that Indian warships also roaming the South China Sea as well in this present context. So you see the connection between the ASEAN and India, and especially Cambodia and India has a very historical and very strategic, as Excellency was said. But I believe that our audience today, most of them are the business, from the business school, so they take more interest in the growing of the trade relations between India and Cambodia, and the trade opportunity that present to them in the future. Excellency has already mentioned about the successful Indian company working in Cambodia, including the Bajaj company. Also, I believe that the medicine company from India also working through the CII, the Confederation of Indian Industry, and the Federal Chamber of Commerce of India, has been promoting trade in goods with Cambodia for quite a few years already. India has already pumped $1 million into ASEAN India funds, covering in every field, and India has built a lot of centers in CLMV. That includes Cambodia as a sea, We have quite a few English centers as well as the IT center in throughout the countries by Indian. And Indian has set up, as Excellency have just said, the space center in Ho Chi Minh City, receiving the data from the Indian satellite covering the use of the lands and resources underneath and so on and on. So, thank you once again, Excellency, for your talk, for your briefing on the Indian East. We believe that we have more chance, and we also express our appreciation for your assistance and your kindness from the embassy as well from the government. So, without further ado, I will let the floor ask questions to Excellencies. So, let's have some questions from the floor. Please. We have a few minutes for questions. Please.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
First of all, thank you for the last insightful talk. My question, you have talked a lot about prospects that India and its policy have for Asia. That at its policies, given the rise of China and the conflict between Asia and China already might affect India. So, what are the challenges that India has in this the implementation of the policy expansion?
Thank you for the question. I think first of all, let me clarify. Our Prime Ministers have said so in the past, not just Prime Minister Modi, but previous Prime Minister, that within Asia and in the larger global context, I talked about 18th century, and I said 18th century can't be achieved without India and ASEAN growing. Actually, we made statements that 18th century cannot be achieved without India, ASEAN, and China growing. Because if you combine all three, we are more than half the population, or nearly about half the population of the world. And again, within the context of Asia itself, we believe, and we've always said, and the Chinese leaders have agreed on it, that there is enough room and space for both India and China to develop, because we both are developing countries. We both need to first create conditions for our own people to prosper. So we do not see development of India and strengthening of our relations with ASEAN as being in competition with or competition against China and ASEAN relations development. I think everybody is in this world of today is trying to build linkages and bridges with other countries. China and India are not excluded from that, to ensure greater prosperity for themselves and for their partners. And in this whole scenario, this is a partnership. This is not seen as a competition either between India or China, or India, ASEAN vis-a-vis China, or ASEAN, China vis-a-vis India. So I don't see this as a challenge at all. As I said, there is enough scope. For example, if you look at infrastructure, there are ADB reports and the reports from World Bank which will say there are close to about $1.7 or $1.8 trillion of infrastructure investment required within Asia to improve connectivity. Now that connectivity will improve livelihoods of all the people. Now I'm sure this much amount of money neither China nor India alone will be able to bring. So we all have to work together to be able to contribute towards the common prosperity. And therefore, we don't see this as being a challenge or as sort of competition between our two countries.
Thank you, Excellency. As we see in this world, the 21st century is the century of Asia, not Europe or America anymore, because the economic growth is growing in Asia now in this century. We, to put in short term or in simple word, China is a factory, whereas India is the technology and the chip produced in India going for the factory in China, and then the China will produce the final product from China. So they are complement to each other in the field of growing in economy. Anyway, any more questions? Yes, please.
Okay, first of all, I would like to say thank you so much for your time to share with us with the insightful information which is related to India and its policy. So my question is that besides to India Act policy, what are the opportunities between India and Cambodia bilateral cooperation? Thank you.
Thank you. Bilateral cooperation, as I briefly touched upon, we have different strands of cooperation. One is in the area of human resource training, that we are providing training to our Cambodian friends through short-term courses, through scholarship. The second part of the developmental cooperation is the work that Indian companies are doing through our soft loans in terms of developing transmission lines and water resources within Cambodia. Right now there are 3 projects on water resource development which are going on. I mentioned the launch of last week of rural water supply projects under which we will supply 1,500 hand pumps in different rural areas. These are basically 4 provinces of Cambodia where these hand pumps will be installed over the next 2 years and improve the water supply for rural areas. We are developing a canal and a dam, and we recently agreed with the government of Cambodia to develop another dam and canal in one part of Cambodia. Similarly, on transmission lines, we are working on 2 transmission lines to improve the flow of electricity within Cambodia. That's broadly what we would call developmental cooperation between India and Cambodia. On the political side, as I mentioned, since 1981, when we re-established our diplomatic relations, we've had regular exchanges of high-level visits as well as dialogue mechanisms. There is a joint commission which looks at all aspects of cooperation. So we had a meeting of joint commission last year, and that evaluates all the cooperation that we do. On economic side, there are several things which are happening. One, on tourism, we have formed a tourism cooperation group to improve the tourist traffic between India and Cambodia. India today is the world's 2nd largest market in terms of outbound tourism, or people going out of India to other countries for tourist travel. And we certainly want more Cambodians also to travel to India. So we are trying to work with the Ministry of Tourism here to see how the two-way tourist traffic can be increased. I mentioned about bilateral trade and investment. Trade figures are low, but they are increasing. There is a lot of scope for importing things that you import currently now from, let's say, Japan or Korea, from India, machinery or electrical goods. And what we are trying to do with the Ministry of Commerce is to make more Cambodian businessmen aware of the opportunity of doing trade and commerce with Indian companies. A part of this is investment. Indian private companies are looking at investment, and the government has created this $100 million fund which is looking at specific areas where we can increase our investment. And the third leg of our cooperation is on the cultural field, which I mentioned about the restoration and conservation of temples. We run, in terms of contemporary, we run dance classes in the Royal University of Fine Arts, which teaches Indian dance to Cambodian students. We also have a lecturer at the Buddhist University of Cambodia who teaches Sanskrit and Pali, because our languages are again very similar. So all these aspects of cooperation are progressing well with Cambodia, and I see it right to be there.
Well, we have time enough for 2 more questions if you have quick questions, please. From the back. Ladies, please, we empower women and girls, and should be ladies and girls and ask more questions than men. Do I hear any more questions, please? Well, I can see. You see, they all understand what you have to bring up.
I should also.
Because no patient, it can mean 2 things. Either you understand it all or you don't understand at all. Anyway, on behalf of the university and on behalf of our president, I would like to express our gratitude to you, Excellency, and to your embassy for contributing to this occasion as well as for helping in decorating our India room. President said, and it reflects the identity of India. We have arranged the room if you guys have time to visit, as India is the birthplace of many religions. So we have put the picture reflecting different scope of the power and religion. When you enter the room, you will see that the picture of Lord Buddha Nirvana, and then the temple of Gaya, where he stayed during his lifetime. And then if you look behind on the left side, you will see the famous Taj Mahal, which representing the tomb of the famous queen of Shah Jahan in the 14th century. And then if you look at the right side, it's the temple in Madhya Pradesh depicting Kama Sutra. Anyone know about Kama Sutra? It's the root of the belief and in the yoga and Hinduism. And then in the center, we put the picture of Red Fort, symbolizing the power of King Ashoka. He's the great emperor which stopped the spread of the Emperor Alexander from the west. So, and then on the wall we put the picture reflecting the wildlife and the tea plantation, as well as the North Lake, the great Dal Lake of Kashmir. So once again, thank you very much, sir. And I would like you guys to join me in giving a big applause to the ambassador. Yeah, maybe in the front.